Hi, everyone. This is CricketSong with Uner Wisdom, and you're watching another episode of Wyrds, Witches, Witchcraft. Tonight, I have a special guest, Benebell Wen. Sorry, kind of spaced there. But we're missing my co-host. Obsidian Fire is not here, and I just hope that everything's okay if she ends up popping up in the chat while this goes on. So sending out some love and supportive energy to make sure everything's okay with her over there in France. But tonight, Benebell and I are going to be speaking about Baneful Magick. So welcome, Benebell.
Hi, Sherry. Nice to see you.
Yay. Why don't, in case our viewers are not familiar with you, your link is in the information section of the video, so they can go check out your YouTube. But why don't you give us give them a brief introduction of who you are and what you practice?
My name is Benebell. I'm the author of Holistic Tarot and the Tao of Craft, and I recently came out with my own tarot deck, the Spirit Keeper's Tarot. I practice a hodgepodge, mostly traditional Eastern witchcraft, Eastern forms of metaphysics. I focus mainly on tarot, I Ching, astrology, and feng shui. Those are my four big ones.
Yes, nice, nice. Yeah, unfortunately, I found out about your tarot deck after it had already sold out. But I hear or read that you're going to come out with a second edition.
Yeah, I'm going back to the drawing board, doing a couple of minor, very, very minor redesigns, but I do want to do something different for the second edition, and I will be putting out a second edition of the deck in 2019.
And I'm going to make sure I get myself a copy. I'll have to pre-order if necessary, because I'm kind of like super excited about that. Because I was on a search for a new tarot deck, and that's when I found Avalon's deck. Pre-order. Yes. And yeah, I'm excited about that one. But then I saw yours, and I'm like, black and white. Are you kidding? This is so cool. But that's okay. I am going to get a deck. But we're not talking tarot tonight. No. Maybe we can talk tarot another night.
Yes.
But tonight we're going to talk about Baneful Magick. Hey, everyone in the chat room. So bear with me, because usually Obsidian Fire is keeping an eye on the chat when we go through too. So if you have questions while we're talking about our topic, if you can put them in caps, that way it pops out at me quicker, please do. If you have questions other than Baneful Magick and we have time, then we'll answer. But we want to kind of stay on topic if that's okay. All right. So Baneful Magick. How would you, I guess, define Baneful Magick so we can make sure we're on the same page when we're discussing this?
I actually tend to keep it really broad. I would say with the intent to harm, any form of ritual magic that is executed with the intention to harm. Now, with that said, I don't necessarily think that's malicious. Intent to harm can also be intent to restore balance, to instill a form of justice that was not, met. So it's not malicious per se. Does that, you know what I mean?
But I do. I know what you mean.
Intend to hurt someone or to do something against their wishes.
That's how you would define baneful or malicious?
Baneful magic. Yeah, because you're intending to harm them. So yeah. Okay.
And I guess, so how would you define malicious magic then?
Well, I don't think I don't know what malicious magic is. I guess malicious is an adjective that describes some forms of craft. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because I think I can practice baneful craft and not necessarily be malicious, because the intention is to restore some kind of balance or to rectify a miscarriage of justice.
And so if that,
right,
if that is your intention, but the consequences may be harmful or hurtful, that's different than just saying, I'm hurting this person just because I want to hurt.
I think malicious, if you're using the word malicious magic, that would describe sort of, the intention from beginning to end, right? But baneful craft doesn't necessarily have to be malicious, but obviously there are going to be forms of baneful craft that are malicious.
Right. No, I get it. And it's interesting because until I started watching some of your videos, I didn't realize you were a lawyer. So it makes perfect sense. I'm like, oh, ask her about the definitions because she's going to know. She's going to know. So I see what you mean. And actually, before talking to you about that, I would just think that all baneful magic would be malicious. But if you're looking at it with the idea that you're trying to restore justice because justice was not carried through, then yeah, that's your intention, not necessarily to harm someone. But if you were following through, it may harm someone, but that wasn't your specific purpose of what you were doing, your motive, I guess, right?
And I think, I mean, for better or for worse, my legal background does inform a lot of how I view codes when it comes to practicing craft. But at the same time, I would also argue that I think maybe I was attracted to the practice of law because that's how I've always thought anyway. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a chicken or egg situation.
No, right. That makes perfect sense to me.
But yeah, I do think in a very methodical way. You know, just like if you lock somebody up for murdering someone, you're harming that person. Like, make no mistake, you've harmed that person, you know, but at the same time, there's some form of justice being served. So I would describe baneful magic along those lines as well. It's not necessarily malicious, but of course, people can take that craft and make it malicious.
Right. Do you think, in thinking about looking at justice and looking, so I'm a witch and I feel like justice wasn't carried through, and I'm going to work my craft to ensure that it does. Do you think that that's subjective at some point, though?
I mean, that's the whole argument with vigilante justice, right? And
Mhm.
so I mean, that's the whole, that's definitely a debate. I don't think there's a definitive right or wrong answer. And it also boils down to the individual, which is great about witchcraft. It comes down to what you believe in your code. So I wouldn't impose my beliefs onto others. I'm personally not always against vigilante justice, but I also think, you know, earlier we were talking about, for example, practices of martial arts. Once upon a time, you really weren't supposed to be practicing martial arts without a form of spirituality attached to the martial arts. You didn't divorce the two. You know what I mean? I mean, this is, I mean, we're talking like sort of the ideological aspects of the art, but yeah, that was part of the philosophy at one point. And was considered very unwise to not practice meditation and forms of spirituality alongside learning how to train your body to do things that were considered extraordinary. And so witchcraft, I think, is a lot like martial arts in that sense. I don't know if it's wise to be practicing witchcraft without also finding some form of personal religion or spirituality to use that to govern your craft.
Right, to give you like the morals and your ethics and your values that you're going to follow while you're doing this craft that could hurt someone or cause harm if you're not checking yourself, I guess, right?
Yeah, and not just others, but I think whenever we do succeed at harming others, it will come. I mean, I'm not the whole threefold. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, in some form of energetic way, on a grander philosophical perspective, it does come back to hurt you. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like,
because if I hurt you, I hurt me if we're all one, right?
right. And so there is some, like, I think there is a kernel of truth in that sense of like energy comes back full circle in some way. I don't know exactly how. I don't know if there's a multiplication to it, but there is some kind of a greater balance that we don't always understand. So I definitely see that when I do it, you know, and I don't make any pretenses about it. So for example, in Eastern forms of baneful magic, there are a couple of ways that you go about it in terms of your philosophy.
Mhm.
What powers your craft, right? So it's, you use the bad karma of the individual to work. Basically, karma is seen as a form of energy, right?
Mhm.
And so you can leave karma alone and let it play out organically in the world, or witchcraft is a form of manipulation of karma.
Right.
So under this theory, this belief structure, what you would do is take somebody's bad karma and use that and manipulate it to serve a form of justice, or to make, you know, bring harm to them more immediately, rather than let their karma play out over, you know, because we believe in past lives and reincarnation over multiple lifetimes or whatever it is, right? But then if you see it that way, it's predicated on the fact that that person has done something wrong, right?
Right.
Like, right? It's presuming there's bad karma to be harnessed. The other way is your own good karma, where you have to sacrifice your good karma and turn your good karma into energy and use that energy to power your craft. And then the third approach would be petitioning the gods, because we believe in a pantheon of gods and goddesses. And so there are certain gods and goddesses that you would petition and call upon to help you with your craft, to help you execute what you're asking for, or some combination of those three practices.
Right, right. And that makes sense to me. I mean, I can think of that, and while you were speaking, I was like, okay, yeah, so that bad karma, using it, it's almost like a return to sender. Whatever you've sent me in a negative way, I'm going to just flip it and send it right back to you. Or I'm going to take my love and positive energy and fuel my intention and send it to you, or petition the gods, very similarly to what you were saying. And that makes perfect sense to me. So I don't know if you can, but examples, could you give some sort of examples and situations either that you've experienced or that you can, just think of as a hypothetical, where you might do a baneful magic situation? I know you said to carry justice, but do you have sort of like an example of that?
We can get into a story time.
Sure. Yes. Perfect. Perfect.
I'm gonna be specific when it comes to the craft, I think, but I'll try to vague book what happened, because I don't think the person will ever watch. But okay, so this is the most recent example I can come up with, and it's gonna make a lot of people judge me and not like me after this. But,
please stop. Whatever.
So okay, but so what happened was somebody had caused tremendous harm to my cat and killed my cat. Okay, and then it was a person very close to me, like biologically, like not biologically, like family wise close. Okay, so I was trying to just be the bigger, forget it. But this person really wasn't remorseful for having killed my cat and actually starved my. It's a long story, I don't want to get into that part. And so what I actually did was so in one form of Chinese spellcrafting is what you do is you take paper, rice paper, and what you would do is we do a lot of sigil magic. And so you write the person's name along with what you believe that person has done wrong. You petition a dark god. I don't like the word dark god and dark goddess, but just to be really lazy with my vocabulary, I'm just going to use those terms.
Okay.
Because we're immediately on the same page, even though we all know it's lazy terminology. So I petitioned a dark goddess, and I wrote out the person's, just the whole thing. And then what you do is you have to rip it out by hand. So you rip out the outline of the poppet, and then you either drown the poppet or you burn the poppet. There's a couple of different ways to do it. So I drown the poppet in my own blood and personal effects of that individual, right? And then so the idea was so when you do that kind of a craft, what it is you say, I'm putting in my own blood and I'm putting in my own karma. So I said, whatever amount of karma that I have that you need to carry this out, take it and carry out what happened, whatever it was. And so what happened was I acted in the heat of passion, which is another thing that I like to talk about. I think it's much better to be more methodical and calm-headed when you do things. Doing things in the heat of passion, you don't always you're not good at thinking broadly about potential ramifications. It's not because you're dumb. It's just you're like stuck in this heat of passion, right? And my cat just died in a very painful way. And so I did that, and then I drowned it. And then what ended up happening was this person went to the ER and the lungs started filling up with water. I don't know if there's correlation.
Of course, there's correlation. I don't know. Of course.
What happened was this person was very, very close to it was to the point where people were talking about wills and estates and what to do if this person passes on, and the lungs were filling up with water and wasn't stopping, right? And so then I realized that I wasn't hurting the person, because the person is connected to people that I love.
Right.
And so who I ended up hurting were the people that I love. Yeah. And then because they were hurting, it was just a big hot mess. Like the whole thing was just not it was just a big mess, right? And so my mom is a practitioner, and I don't want to talk to her about these things, but I had to, because at this point I didn't know what the fuck to do. I was just like, I don't know if I caused it, but I feel like shit. And I don't know what happened. And like, it kind of makes sense. Like the symbolism matches what the symptoms were. So I was just scared as all shit. And so I didn't know who to talk to about, like, is there a reverse? Like, how do you reverse it? I didn't think about how to reverse it before I started. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't think about that. And so I called my mom and I told her what had happened, right? And she, first of all, after she told me how disappointed in me she was and how much, I was like a complete failure in life, she said, if you use water, you have to use fire. Like you have to use some form of a hot thing, like this elemental makes sense, right?
Right.
But in order to do that, I had to reverse what I had done in this, universe of beliefs that, my family holds. I had to use some form of fire, and that had to be summoned within with your personal energy and your personal chi. And so the person never died. She was fine. Everything's fine. It's all good. She was healthy. She was brought back. But in using the fire form of chi energy, I ended up giving myself like the worst case of like eczema and a flare. So like my whole face blew up into eczema, and like I had rashes for 2 years. That like I went to so many, and then I had my own immune system issue. So I went to see so many different doctors about my skin condition, and nobody could give me any solutions to the eczema. And it was just something I had to like, I tried different diets, but I had to just ride out like what I had done to myself, and I think that I say the eczema because it's so obvious, it's a more obvious one. Usually I think craft, it's not that obvious, but I think that one was so obvious because of like how much energy and how much like emotion went into it. Everything was just very in your face, just like, arguments. Some arguments are like everybody's in their face, it gets physically violent. And some arguments are just passive aggressive arguments between frenemies, right? So this is a very violent, physically abusive type of situation that went on. But that's an example, I think, of how it kind of hits back at you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's definitely an example of the whole idea of an injustice was done and you were trying to right that. However, emotional energy is so volatile. And like you said, you're not really thinking of everything. Yeah.
I think when it comes to Baneful Magick, the great paradox is that charging it through emotion is powerful and effective, but at the same time, it's also not the best. Like a controlled, methodical form of craft is so much better all of the time because it's more calculated. You can anticipate sort of all the different things that could happen. I think when you act in the heat of passion, it's really hard to foresee what it'll do to yourself.
Right. I agree.
Because in fact, in the moment, I was like, I don't care what happens. Like, you know what I mean? You don't even care.
Right. You don't.
But it's not true. You do care. You're just saying it in the heat, and so it's just, it was just bad all around. It was just very big misjudgment of conduct.
What I was just thinking as you were talking is taking when you're, or what I've done in the past and what I encourage people to do is when you're feeling that emotion, to take that emotion and store it in something so you can tap that emotion to fuel something later. So, I mean, if you're feeling like that, or if I'm feeling like that, to store it in whatever vessel you're going to use to store it in, so that you have, whether it's knots, if you want to do some, tying that energy in a knot, and then using it later once you've considered what you're going to do. So if you're going to do Baneful Magick, but you want to, or unless you can re-tap into that energy, which I find is a little more difficult than storing it and then releasing it into what I'm going to do, might be a little more controlled, maybe.
I absolutely agree with you. Like 100% agree with you. The hard part is when you're in the moment of darkness, no one's going to take your advice. I'm just sorry.
I know they're not. I know they're not. I know. Because I know how difficult it is for me to do it myself. Although if I consider, the negative consequences of past things. I haven't had anything as traumatic as your example, but things that, I realized I should have thought through more methodically than just acting in the heat of the moment. I try to remember that when I'm feeling like that again, because I've had some instances where I curse the bitch was what I was thinking. But I didn't. Because of consequences, and I guess sometimes people just need to go through a situation like you described to remember and be able to recall that and go like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that again, kind of thing.
The funny thing about that experience is because my relationship with that person from the get-go was never that great. But after that whole thing happened, I think something just like a weight just got lifted. And so I'm not saying the relationship is great, but like, I just don't care. Like, like something left, some anger, some shadow, something left. And I just felt I felt alleviated of something. And so let's just let bygones be bygones.
Right. Which is a good thing that came out of a yucky situation.
Yeah.
Oh God. I'm just sitting here thinking all the issues you had, after she's recovered, and then you're dealing with the lingering effects of. That's crazy. Ugh.
I think it's interesting in sort of the pagan circles. You sometimes hear people talk about baneful magic and how it's consequence free. Like, have you heard that? Like, when you've never heard people say that?
No. Well,
there's no consequences. It's just all in your head.
I've never had consequences.
Huh?
I've heard people say I've done it and I've cursed someone and I haven't had negative consequences. I honestly don't think they're connecting some shitty stuff that's happening in their life with what they've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I no comment. But I'm always like, wow, man, I wish I had, like, I don't understand how they can get away with it consequence free, like, that's not how energy works,
I know, right? Like I said, I think they're just not looking at it. Or maybe they're so much in their own life and dealing with the things that they don't think are consequences of what they've done, or they don't think that what they're experiencing is oh no, because then you ask them. I'm thinking of a couple of examples in my head. I'm not going to share exactly what they are because, but I don't, as being an outsider of their life experience and looking and listening to them and listening to what they're talking about and what they're dealing with, as an outsider, you can connect the dots, but maybe if they're living it, they're not, because they don't think maybe this is really bad. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
I think the only thing I would say is, irrespective of what their personal perception or experience is, if I'm on a public platform of any kind talking about baneful magic, I guess I would just want to make clear that my position is that there are consequences.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not going to try to be a pussy about the consequences. I'll take it, like, I know what I did. It's fine. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat what I did and be like, oh, it wasn't really that bad. Like, I will just sort of take it and know that this is what happens. And I think people need to find that kind of, acceptance as well. If you're going to practice this form of craft, you can't go in there with this idea it's consequence free or you can escape consequence. Like, that's just not how it works, I don't think. And so as long as you go in fully informed and you're fully cognizant of what you're doing to yourself, you do you.
Right. And I agree. And for me personally, I think because the witch's pyramid, the pillars of the magician, however you want to call it, I mean, being responsible, knowing myself, understanding what I'm getting into to know. And I think as witches, I mean, for me, a big part is taking responsibility for my choices and my decisions. And if I'm going to curse someone or I'm going to practice baneful magic, then I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. And to say that, like you said, there's no consequences or, oh, no, I didn't mean for that to happen, but it's in direct correlation with what I've done. Well, I may not have meant for that to happen, but it's a consequence of what I've done. I mean, if I'm going to throw a stone at my neighbor's window to break their window and my stone that I threw hit their cat and hurt their cat, that's because I threw the stone through their window. And to say that, oh, I didn't mean for your cat to get hurt. Oh, but I did mean for the window to get broken. Yeah, well, you can't say I'm only taking responsibility for this and not that, because if I didn't do this, then that wouldn't have happened.
You know what I think is so interesting is, you know, how we have this sort of general sense that what's in the physical world has a metaphysical or occult equivalent, and what's energetic, what's in the, you know, realm of energy has a material equivalent, right? And so I think the legal system is sort of this manifestation of an intuition that we all have as humans, you know? And so because of that, there is a mirror there. If you, for me, whenever I want to try to understand energy a little bit better, I'll think about the law. And likewise, vice versa, if there's a gray area of the law that I really don't know what the answer is from the legal structure, I'll take a moment to sort of look inward at intuition and look at how energy flows and think about what would be correct in terms of how energy flows in this universe, and think about what laws make the most sense that's an equivalent to that. And I don't think that's like a weird connection to make. I think the legal system sprang out of that primal intuition of energy.
Right, I agree. I agree. And I do think sometimes when people say, or when people think that there are no consequences to a baneful magic that they might have done, curses, whatever. Well, you know, I think that you may not see, like you were mentioning, sort of the physical manifestation of something you've done coming, sort of returning to you, or having, again, not times 3, times 2, times 100, whatever, but the repercussions and the consequences may not be a physical manifestation. I mean, having guilty feelings of what you've done might be enough of a consequence. You may then start, and then that could metamorphose into bigger things if you keep feeding the guilt in yourself, kind of thing. I mean, I think there could be consequences that may not be immediately seen, you know?
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking that, and I think sometimes that's what stops me from cursing the bitch. You know, I'm gonna feel so guilty. So I don't know.
Okay, to be fair, I don't, I can count on my hands the number of times I've cursed. Like I mean, I'm not going around cursing people willy-nilly. If I have like a dispute or a spat or, like, you know, drama with somebody, I will never ever resort. Like that's just not something, like, come on, the example I gave, they killed my cat.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
that's horrible. Yeah,
right.
that's horrible.
And
I would probably be right there helping you if you needed help with that.
right. So like,
Seriously.
I mean, when I get to that level, when I'm in that place, it's, you know, I feel like I have a level of justification that a lot of people would understand or sympathize with. So I think that's something to consider as well. Like, where are your bright lines? You know, where are your thresholds? And to never cross your lines, right? And so, you know, just because somebody looked at you funny or someone called you a bitch behind your back, I just think if you're going to resort to hexes and curses over that, you know, there's other things that you might want to look at in terms of yourself and your own, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like you always reach for that immediately, says something about where you are in your own development as well.
I agree.
Whereas,
I agree.
you know, killing your cat and going there is bad, is really unwise, but it's human. It's very, very human, at least.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's going to depend on the individual and what's going on in that individual's lives and how much they've put up with and the circumstances of all that. You know, obviously it's subjective to their life. So if I'm at a place where I may feel that I'm justified in doing baneful magic against someone, and Benebell, you may look at that and go, I can't believe, you know, CricketSong's going to go there with that. But you may not know the whole story, right? So I think it's difficult for us to try to judge someone else's craft anyways.
I think Obsidian Fire is here.
I see that. Are you okay?
Yeah, finally I'm here. I'm so sorry. Everything gone wrong this morning. So
that's okay. Are you okay? You okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
Kind of.
Kind of.
Oh
no. Kind of. Hey, happy to
meet you. I mean, if you had such a bad morning, I'm very grateful that you made it on. So thank you. I feel very flattered. I wouldn't even have showed up.
Oh yeah.
I feel very honored.
Oh no, don't be. I realized first that I was late, and then my computer refused to start, and then my backdrop refused to stay, and so I've thought I think almost everything this morning to be able to join. Even my computer who was refusing to, also refusing to let me in the Google Hangout. So it was a mess, but I'm here.
Yay. I'm glad you're okay. I was getting nervous. I figured the computer gave you some issues because then I was telling Benebell that you wouldn't be able to tell me if the computer wasn't working.
Yeah, I was thinking of that when I was fighting with it. And so we will have to figure out a solution for me to let you know. We will have to find something.
Yeah.
Okay, just let's move on with the show. Sorry.
Not at all. I'm sorry you had such a weird morning.
Yeah, it's okay. It's usual by my side. I will pick the chat real quick and then try to.
Oh yeah. So, do we have any questions?
We have a lot of comments, but what I did want to ask Benebell is, in general, do you do any form of divination before you go into crafting a spell? So like the example that you gave, would you have done something, or did you, or maybe you were just too emotional where you weren't going to do any divination? You were just going in with that spell about, the example you gave.
So yes, normally in spellcrafting, divination is always integrated into spellcrafting, and you want to sort of use it to guide you in your craft. In the example that I gave, I did not do divination because I knew the answer was no, you shouldn't do this. And so
you did.
Well, I'm not saying I knew the answer, but you know what I mean? Like you're not,
you knew.
You knew that this is not the path to go, but I'm like, no, I'm doing it, and so no, there was no divination involved in that particular example, but it was also because I knew I didn't want to because if they, I just knew I didn't want to know. This is me, this is my thing, I'm going in there, this is my fight, no gods need to be involved. So.
And that's how I think that's just how we work when we're so, it's like, again, the cricket song, oh, don't cursor. No, that's not what you want to do. Where's your compassion? That fuck it, I'm doing it anyway. And this is the one saying, do the divination. It's that emotional charge that we just don't, and we just go in and yeah. Let me see. We had a lot of comments about the consequences thing. Someone asked, do you think all baneful magic can be justified?
No. No. Wait. What's the question again? Do you
think all baneful magic can be justified? It's when we were talking about, sometimes there is justification. And I think we were talking about the difference between, going into a situation and feeling that it's justified as opposed to just going in and being malicious against someone. And I guess I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think if someone wants to sit down, they could talk themselves into feeling that it's justified. We could talk ourselves into anything, but I don't even know if there is a concrete answer to that.
I think, right. And I think it also depends. So for example, I have a stronger Buddhist leanings in terms of religion, in terms of how it sometimes governs my belief systems, right? And so if you really want to go Buddhist with it, anything, all forms of it is not justified, right? You want to sort of, like in the higher theory, you want to let things flow on their own. You want to be very Taoist and go with and not do anything. So like if you're really going to go there, then none of it is ever justified. But I think I'm sort of, at peace with the fact I'm a human and I'm going to be flawed, and I do need to act in that guttural way sometimes. I don't know. No, I don't think it's always justified. Most of the time it's not justified. I would acknowledge that what I did was not justified, even though they killed my cat.
Yeah, then I guess again, like I was just sitting here thinking, I think that's justified. Choose to kill your fucking cat, God damn it, kind of thing.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Like I said, I feel like I can also talk myself out of that, you know, or I could talk myself into that. And I think that's the point that you were making, trying to go in with a clear mind and not being fueled with emotion may give you a clearer understanding of whether, you know, it's justified or not, kind of thing. And if you have, like you said, if you have spirituality, if you have some idea of what your own code is, then you can use that to determine whether you should go through with something or not.
I think that's very important for practitioners. It's not about imposing my code or your or some form of established code, but I think for each practitioner in and of themselves as an individual, they need to establish a code for themselves. I would even say like this is your code, this is your religion, you need to live by your code. And as long as you can keep your own compass that you've crafted as your moral compass, then it's a lot harder to go wrong. You know what I mean? And so you do need to have a framework that you've built yourself. No one says you have to buy somebody else's framework, but you do need to have one for yourself in place before you start doing all of these things. And because I think, you know, if you're doing a lot of craft and you start, for example, let's say you start seeing that they're very effective, you know, you're seeing that it's actually working consistently, you become tempted to reach for it instead of going about it the sort of mundane, like instead of working your way through life, you feel tempted to always reach for that. And I don't know if that's a wise habit to get into either. You know what I mean? There needs to be a balance between what you exercise with your two hands and what you decide need to be exercised through the astral realm or through the energetic realms.
Yeah, for me, I think they go hand in hand. You know, if I'm not willing to do something in the physical realm, then I probably shouldn't be trying to manipulate stuff in the astral realm. And if I'm manipulating something in the astral realm, I should definitely follow up in the physical realm to make sure that, you know, magic takes the path of least resistance. So if there's something I could do in the mundane to open up that pathway to make my manifestation happen quicker, you better believe I want to be doing that.
Yeah, and I think all forms of change, creating change does require the four elements. You know, it has to be in a change you're creating in the physical world, the astral world, the mental world, your mindset as well, and then something happens at the soul level with your soul as well. So when the four are manipulated or are exercised in some way, I think that's witchcraft.
I agree. Yay. Someone asked about, I don't know, this is going back because I had to scroll back up because chat was moving quickly. But how does energy work? Consequences, can you express how you believe it works? So I think what they're asking is, how does energy work in relation to consequences and how you believe that might work energetically? I think that's what they're asking.
Well, I think everything that happens is fueled in some latent way by, like, the fact that we're having this conversation. There's some greater, like, energy underlying the physical steps that got all of us here, right? And so that's just a very, very simple, basic example. And so if you're talking about, you know, consequences of craft, that's just, you know, extrapolated out, right? Like all the little steps that you do, all the intentions, all your thoughts, every little aspect of what's going on is creating little ripples in the energy that then fuels the actions into, like, the chain of events in a certain direction.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
Yeah. So if you're constantly, like, a negative intention, negative thought, like if you're sort of building this path in that particular direction, you know, directing karma as well in a direction toward harm, like that's sort of the path you're building for energy to flow. So.
Yeah, it's the momentum. The more negative or destructive or harmful thoughts, it's like a snowball. If you ever lived on the, you know, where there's snow, you know, when you're making a snowman, you start with a little tiny snowball and you keep building it. It's like the momentum of what you're thinking and focusing on and looking at and doing and working. And if you're doing the physical to get even a baneful spell to manifest, it's still, and I just don't see how someone can be immersed in that and not sort of have more propelling towards them. How can you play in a dirty puddle and not get filthy. I don't understand how you could do that. I don't know. Well, I guess you could wear a raincoat. I don't know. I don't know. Oh my God. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I like metaphors, but maybe that one wasn't, because now I can think of an argument to get out of that. So I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, my metaphors on the spot are like always really crappy. Like
I thought it was really good as it was coming out of my mouth. And then I'm like, well, no, you could
wait a minute.
put on a raincoat. Maybe you could take off your clothes, but well, no, because then it would get on your face and your hands, but maybe, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. Even if, okay, I do acknowledge that, because I do think the energy of the chain of events is very objective, right? Like it's very not. It's like there's no like emotions tied to it. It's not like revengeful or punishment. Like it's just this very science. It's just this. It just flows, right? And so what you've sent out might. I'm not saying it comes back to hurt you, but it might do something that you really, really didn't intend. And then how are you going to feel about that? So it's not a one note possibility when it comes to consequences. It's not always an if then statement, or you put this out there, it comes like, it's not like a boomerang, you know?
Right.
Like it's just so complex, but like what you can almost say for sure is that there is going to be something that you had not accounted for, that you didn't necessarily want to happen. Even if it means, like accepting sociopaths, you don't want to hurt people who have never hurt you, right?
Right.
But you might end up doing exactly that. And then how are you going to, I think it's very complex, I think
everything, when we're talking about witchcraft, when we're talking about spirituality, when we're talking about a lot of things, everything is more complex than we can understand it, because our human brains can only comprehend so much. And I think when we're talking about things like magic and witchcraft and spirituality, it's bigger. It's more intricate, and we just, we can't understand everything. And like you were saying, I agree. It's not like a boomerang thing, but even in the example you were speaking to, when you did the magic and this person was hurt, it also hurt people you loved and cared about, which then hurt you. So, maybe, when we're doing Baneful Magick, we may get the manifestation we want, but because that manifested, it affected people we hadn't even considered it would harm. And then that may hurt us or feel guilty. That's my big thing. The guilt. Am I okay living with that guilt? Yes. Then we're good. If you're not, don't do it, Cricket. Don't do it. Leave your consequences at the door. Okay, so that was the energy. What situations would you use Baneful Magick? And we kind of talked about that. You gave an example. What do either of you do to make the distinction? Well, I think that goes back to your spiritual and your morals and your code, right?
Right. You'd have to set one for yourself. I think one of the things I am cognizant of is, for me, I would never act on a defenseless person. So I'm very conscientious of the power dynamic. And so, and that's just me. Like, I don't think this is like a universe. It's just something that I find is instructive for me. I always look at the power dynamic. And if I'm in a position of power over that person, I'll think twice. I'll be more mindful. And I think it's a little easier for me to then try to check myself and be a little bit more objective. But if the power dynamic is such where, that person is in a position of power and I'm exercising every channel I can to bring about some form of justice or to bring about some of balance, but it's not working. In my practice, not like a moral state, like in my practice, I can feel justified in acting in a way to bring balance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, what about the thought that if you believe that there will be no consequences, then there won't be. If you believe there will be consequences, then there will be. The idea of you're creating, and I understand it's like creating your own reality. But if someone, and I could put this in just the idea of if someone doesn't believe in magic, then for them, magic doesn't exist. If someone believes in magic, then magic exists. I feel like that's the same sort of idea. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I come from a little bit of a different perspective. I guess I have I mean, I guess for me, I have such a conviction in such an absolutist conviction in the power of craft that I see it as like, I don't believe there's anything, I don't believe in gravity, right? You know what I mean? Like I can live
I know
in
what you mean. I totally know what you
like I can
mean.
be like, I don't believe in gravity, but the thing is, I might not believe in gravity. I don't understand the science and the physics and the formulas of gravity. Like I don't understand any of that. Therefore, I don't believe in gravity. And I think I'm stuck. I don't even know. Do you know what I'm saying? But you know, it doesn't change the fact I'm affected by gravity. Right. And so I feel like that's where I come from when it comes to craft. But I also acknowledge that's just my belief system.
Well, I know what you mean when you say this, though. But the way I kind of look at it is, and my approach to this is, I personally don't believe in gravity. I know I am affected by gravity, but I take it in the direction that it's because we have, as a collective consciousness, have agreed to the concept of gravity. And because that's part of who I am, because I'm part of the collective, therefore, that's why I'm affected by what we believe is a collective. But me personally, there's no gravity kind of thing.
There's also the level of collective consciousness. I do think collective consciousnesses, or the collective consciousness, can create realities, which is why certain geographic regions have certain magic that isn't so I do believe in that. I do believe, you know, like if you get everybody, like just the cone of power stuff, like you get a group of people in any room, like 3 people in a room that that sort of align their beliefs, align their intentions, something happens. Multiply that out to 3,000, 30, like that's a thing, you know. And so I think there is something in the mind as well. When you align so many minds together in a singular belief system, you can recreate the reality as well.
Yeah, that's the whole idea of working in a coven, but I've never absolutely experienced that wonderful thing, because whatever. But yeah, that's the whole idea in working in a group like that. That's amazing. What time is it? Okay, 9:22. We have about 8 minutes. Let me see. I'm just trying to look through to see.
We didn't hear from you at all.
I know.
Yeah. I know, but I make myself really discreet because I was late and I'm feeling guilty for that. So I don't want to interrupt the conversation that was going on before I was in. So you don't hear from me because I don't say anything to let you go on, you know?
No, interrupt away. We don't hear from you.
I do want to, we don't, like I said, we don't have a lot of time, but Raquel asked a really good question that I really would like to address. Do you believe that anyone, you or anyone, can curse someone just by thinking negatively about them?
Well, I think it would, okay, for me, it depends on how you define curse. I do think there is power in thought. It might not be like, I think there's different levels of power, right? And so I think if you have a very strongly bottled thought or presented thought in your mind, I believe that if it's a potent enough thought, you can create something with a thought. I just think compounding thought with ritual is just taking it to a different level, taking it to another level.
Yeah.
I would say, I suppose you can, because you won't realize it, but you will probably do something in the mundane to go with the south. Because if you are thinking so deeply about someone who hurt you, let's say, and if you think about the ability to create a curse just by thinking, so your thoughts are already baneful, already vengeful, already angry, so you will probably act among those thoughts in the mundane. Let's say you are cooking meal and you are cutting, I don't know, anything, an apple or I don't know, and you are thinking about this person, really strongly, really angry, you with a knife in your hand, you will cut the apple like it was the apple, like it was this person. You will kind of act your craft while cutting the thing. I think you will do something to go along with this sound, so you won't do nothing in the mundane, especially in a state of anger. Anger infuse everything you do in your mundane life. So this will go hand in hand. And so maybe something will happen because you will do something without even acknowledge you are doing something in the mundane. That's my point of view.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there are powers in thought, but I feel like they don't manifest until we bring it out of the ether and bring it into the physical. But like Obsidian was saying, we may do a physical action without really realizing we're carrying that thought into the physical. And I think there are many ways to bring a thought from the ethers into the physical. Words are very easy. So even if you're whispering like that bitch, I just curse her, I've already manifested that, or like Obsidian was saying, imagining that apple is that woman and I'm chopping her head off, or
Like you're doing ritual magic right there. Like
I know,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. But I think if I'm just sitting here and someone's hurt me and I'm just thinking it and not saying or even gestures, middle finger, whatever. Those are gestures that I've taken this thought into the physical. So I feel like something has to happen for it to manifest in the physical.
Like to create a bridge between the world.
Yeah. Yeah. But
But
that's just my opinion.
I agree generally, but it can happen. It can happen. But usually I just don't think we are evolving enough. That you already know that. Usually I think we need something to create a bridge.
Yeah.
Thought, just the power of the thought is the purest form of magic, but I don't think we are, as I've just said, evolved enough to reach it as on a regular basis. Most of the time, we need a bridge.
yeah, that's what I believe too. I think like theoretically, I would think it can happen. I don't think I can do it. I don't think it's something I can.
Yeah.
But like you're asking me on like this, like are black holes real, right? Like it's like theoretically, I think it's something that absolutely can happen. And sometimes when for some people, like if it happens and if it does happen, and someone's asking me to try to explain it, I think we're all connected. That's why divination works. That's how there's something connecting all of us through our psyche, right? And so if you're truly sending something intense through your thought channels, theoretically, you might be able to do something that has the result of a curse, because of how you have directed that thought through the sort of collective connection that you are. Like, it's kind of like how we're all connected to the internet. Like you've sent something out there through those mental psychic channels. So I do believe that that can happen. I don't know if I'm good enough to do it, but I believe there are people out there who can do it.
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can theoretically I can get there with you. But like I think we've all said, honestly, I don't think the majority of humanity has gotten to the level to be able to do that on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's not the norm, I guess.
Right. It's not the norm.
Yeah, it's not the norm. So just thinking badly about your neighbor in a very emotional state, or your landlady or whatever, doesn't mean you're going to make bad things happen if you haven't, for me, if I haven't done some sort of thing to manifest that specific intention in the physical, no matter how much you think it. I don't think anybody else had any other questions that weren't related to what we were discussing. It's 9:29. Is there anything, Benebell, that you wanted to wrap up with? Anything that we didn't have a chance to say that you wanted to on the topic?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground.
And she's got a video on her channel about Baneful Magick. When we're done, I'm gonna put that link to that because that was one of my favorite videos that you did.
I think I have a couple, actually.
There was one in particular that you brought out with some points in that video that you discussed about here, and I was excited to hear you say them. So that was good. Obsidian Fire, did you have anything on the topic that you wanted to add in?
Oh, I did have one thing I wanted to add.
Okay.
Sorry, Obsidian Fire first.
Yeah. No, because I don't know what was
We covered
said before. Yeah. So I don't want to go over again something you've already discussed. So I will just swallow my guilt and rage to have been in late and let things go on.
I know what we can do. We can do another interview. We can do another chat.
Yeah, we could.
Yes.
We could. That could be that. That would be great.
Yes, we must do another one. I'll have to when we're done here. Don't hang up, Benebell. Please stay on, and maybe we can schedule something in the future.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to say.
Okay.
Because I want to get on my soapbox now.
Oh, all right, cool. I love it when people get on their soapboxes.
I don't like it when people get judgy about people's careers, and I think, I just really don't like it. I feel like when people are in that place, first of all, you can't, like, if you're thinking about cursing somebody, you're in a dark place, and probably justifiably so. Like, shit has happened to you. You're not just like randomly, you're not arbitrarily there because someone looked at you funny, right? So if you're there, I think wise people, compassionate people will be there with you. And make sure you don't like kill yourself or kill other people, and just kind of make sure that it's kind of in a somewhat controlled environment. And so I'm really, what I am against is people who judge that and say, no, you shouldn't do that at all. I think, that's like, it's just something some people need to go through. It's a process that people have to go through, and to judge people from a seat that you think is higher than them, it is something that I'm very much against. You don't know their whole story. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know how hurt they've been. You just don't know their story. And maybe them executing their craft is actually a form of the universe bringing justice in a way that the people in this world have failed the universe. And so for you to then sit there and like I just feel like it's really not your place. So just like, if you're not going to roll up your sleeves and help, then butt out.
Let them do what they need to do.
Yeah.
I've always said that we don't really know the whole story. We only know our perspective of what someone's going through, no matter what it is that we're looking at. We can sit there and see what we see and say, and try to learn from what they're going through. If I see a situation and I'm like, gosh, I don't know if I would ever do that. But then I then go, well, why wouldn't I do that? And it gives me a chance to do some self-reflection, when I observe different things, or, oh, I totally agree with that person doing X, Y, Z. Why do I agree with that? I take them as opportunities to do some self-reflection.
And that's totally okay. Like, if I see someone doing something and I like secretly hear without affecting them in any way whatsoever, and I take that and I observe from what I can see, and I say, hey, this is not what I would do. This is how I want it. Like, if I'm sitting here processing information on my own to formulate my own moral code, that's fine. That's your own thing. But what I'm saying is people who then sort of insert themselves in that scenario and say, now, like, that's what I'm really like. I feel like that does more harm, in a way, because you're actually throwing a wrench into a situation you know nothing about.
Exactly. Because we don't. We only know what we can see, and obviously that's a tip. That's just a tip of a whole story that we aren't aware of. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Benebell, for being a guest on the show. This was good. And I want to thank everyone else for showing up in chat. Chat was hopping. Thank you all for being a part of our our show. And make sure you tune in next week at 8:30 p.m. West Coast time. And if you want to find out or have access to more information that I have available, you could check out my Patreon page. I have the Quest Within series with my husband, Becoming Witch series for my patrons. There is a Journey of Self-Love blog posts for you to read about. Go check that out. If you're not on my CricketSong Facebook page, go over there right now because I have stuff posted usually daily. And don't forget about the Facebook, Wyrds, Witches, and Witchcraft, our wonderful Facebook group. We have, I think, over 100 people now, members of that group. So go check that out. And Obsidian, do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Au revoir tout le monde, je suis désolée, j'ai été très peu là, ça s'est pas très bien passé pour moi ce matin, mais je vais me rattraper. J'espère dans tous les cas que la discussion entre CricketSong et Benebell aura été agréable pour vous, et n'hésitez pas à laisser des commentaires, à nous rejoindre la semaine prochaine. Bye bye.
Bye everyone, love you, blessed be.